Hey guys, Yoni Kosminski here, and we are effectively back. This is the first recording of Successful Scales Relaunched. I had the great fortune of sitting down with Leslie Camacho, who has been working in agency land for north of 25 years, working in largely operations roles. Over the past 3 years, he's been an EOS implementer and has helped about 30 businesses run on EOS. 2 of them have graduated, 3 of them have exited, and it is a really fascinating, I would say in many ways, philosophical conversation. We touch on a whole lot of different areas and disciplines, but if you're looking to get better clarity on what you should be doing in your business, I think this is a really great episode for you. Get back into it, enjoy, and many more episodes coming your way. Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in? And of course, myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. All right, Leslie, welcome to the first episode of Successful Scales in quite some time. I am beyond thrilled to have you here, and it's an honor. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I am happy to be the first guest on the relaunch, as it were.
Yeah, well, I couldn't think of many better guests when we connected almost a year ago now, actually, for the first time. You know, we really hit it off, and you were someone that, you know, the sea of people that I got to meet at the EOS conference in San Diego, you really stood out, and you stood out for a few reasons to me. I mean, one, growing up in agency land and then hearing your incredible journey and all the things that you've done and the time, you know, that was just something that really stuck with me. But also just your general position today, where it's all really focused on, how do I help others? How do I help other businesses achieve material success? And so sort of putting, you know, I'd say 2 of my passions together in an individual makes you very memorable. So I'm really excited to relaunch and have you as the very first guest. And thank you for making the time.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you for the kind words. I will take it. It was a pleasure meeting you at the EOS conference too. And I remember one of the things that really stood out is the core values aspect that you have behind all your entrepreneurial endeavors. And when I was able to read those and see those, and then speaking with you, I felt like, I found someone else that's part of the tribe, part of my people, so to speak. So very happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate that. So obviously we're going to dive into a whole series of questions, but you know, just to let the audience know a little bit more about you, because I have obviously heard your backstory in a lot of detail. It would be great if you can take us on a little bit of a journey of, you know, up until getting onto this podcast, just a little bit about your history and what you've gotten into.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the important thing I've had to really come to grips with about myself is that I've been an entrepreneur all my life, whether I wanted to be or not. I think it's something that for those of us that feel the need to go out and do our own thing or participate in that ecosystem, it's very hard not to do it. So I had my first, quote, business in 3rd grade on the playground, where my friends and I discovered we could take these toy soldiers and take them apart with a screwdriver and put them back together and essentially create our custom ones. And then we sold those for lunch money. And then from there, I had, I guess nowadays we would call it a digital agency, though digital is so standard, I don't think that's too much a firm. But this was back like in 1997, 98, the olden days. I had a dev shop that did e-commerce work and database work. And then I sold that And then for the next 15, 20 years, I worked for content management systems as either like the COO or customer officer. But these were like small companies, less than 20, 30 people. And so my real job was doing everything but the design and the program. So I learned a lot about sales, customer support, service, building partner networks. And because of the nature of that software, almost all my friends, peers, clients, customers, like my entire relationship network, the vast majority were agency owners of one sort or another. And so for the last 20, 25 years, I've been in agency land, so to speak. And I've fallen in love with it, and it's the people I serve the most. How I got here specifically is I got fired from my last content management job. One of my best friends, still a best friend named Brandon Kelly, I worked for, he owns Craft CMS. And I worked for Craft CMS for 5 years, and 4.5 of them were really good, and the last 6 months were terrible. And he called me in. One day, he was just coming back from Australia, actually. They had a one-day conference out there. I met with him, and I went to meet with him at our office, and he's basically, Leslie, I got to let you go. And we had a real heart-to-heart, and within about 3 minutes, I realized Brandon's right. I'm not happy. We're not on the same page. I am not contributing the way that I want to be contributing. And I didn't see it as a favor at the time, but I knew that he was right. And I was so thankful he had the courage to do it. And that kind of launched me into like, what am I doing with my life at that point? So I did consulting. I was a fractional operations officer, a fractional integrator for about 5 years as I tried to find my way around, like, what do I do next? Did some really good work. And then another friend of mine that had an agency on EOS, name of the agency is Focus Lab. His name is Eric Regan. He sat me down one day and he said, Leslie, do you know that you're a better coach than you are a consultant? And I was like, Eric, no, tell me more. Because he's known me 15 years at this point. It wasn't kind of an out of the blue. And Eric's a super thoughtful guy. And so he introduced the concept of, or he really was the first one who gave me the invitation, you should consider being an EOS implementer. And it still took me another 2 years from that point to actually make the transition to being an implementer. But it was really Eric and then a subsequent conversation, many conversations with my partner in life and business, Laura, and just learning more about it. I got an MBA while I was making this decision because I'm an overeducated nerd. And in getting my MBA, I specialized in organizational change and entrepreneurship. And every time I was getting my MBA, I was like, this is really great. But if you're a small business, EOS does this better. Or here's 3 MBA tools, and here's how Gino Wickman put these together as part of Traction. And so it really helped me validate a lot of the critical thinking wasn't just kind of off the cuff. And then I finally made the jump during COVID, towards the end of COVID, to actually buy the franchise. It's a big investment. I went through a huge series of interviews. And then the last piece of that was, am I actually going to enjoy being in session with clients? And thankfully, I do. I love it. Being in the session room with clients is the most rewarding thing I've done in my life. It lets me leverage all the successes, mistakes, learning, and lets me utilize the same skill set in often radically different scenarios, working with the community I really love best and helping them grow. So it'll be 3 years ago this week, actually, because my EOS start date was Valentine's Day 3 years ago in 2021. Yes, 2022. So it'll be 3 years this Friday that I'll have been an implementer, and it's been a wild ride. So that's the very condensed version of how I got there. Burned out my career, got fired, overeducated myself, did 5 years of soul searching, made the jump, took out a fat loan to do it, put everything kind of on the line, and don't regret it at all. It's been amazing.
Leslie, that is quite the journey to getting to where you're at. And I don't know if you noticed, but I was taking down quite a few notes while I was listening to you work your way through that journey. Again, like I was saying at the start, definitely have that connection, and agency land is the term. I like to say I grew up in agency land. And I think it's a really unique place for people to grow up. Or you've really, your hat, your bed, you've laid everything out in this particular industry because it's so high paced. It's heavy on the service delivery side. There's so many layers to what that environment creates. And I'm so curious to get into your latter stages and sort of what's more current, because you'll just have such a unique perspective. I mean, firstly, happy Valentine's Day / 3 year.
Yeah, thank you.
3 years with EOS. Before I actually go into some of these questions, I think it's probably helpful for the audience. If you've listened to episodes before, the notion of EOS and traction will not be new to you. But outside of having Mike Payton on a while back, I haven't had any other EOS implementers. And I think it's probably worthwhile just helping people understand what the relationship looks like and sort of what that process looks like. How are you adding value? In the last 3 years, how are you actually adding value to the companies that you're supporting?
Yeah, so EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and you can see I guess if you're listening to this, you can't see it, but it's based on the book Traction by Gino Wickman, which I think has passed its 20th anniversary at this point. And EOS has 3 big promises, like just at a super high level. We promise vision, meaning everyone in the company, in the organization knows where you're going and how you're going to get there. Traction, which means that everyone has the discipline and accountability. I like to say it's the transparency. There's no micromanagement. Your teams are empowered. You can delegate, let go of the vine, because people are working towards the same goal, towards the same long-term direction. And then healthy. So healthy is just however healthy your current team is. EOS intentionally focuses on team health. And I think in agencies, especially important, because we talk about you got to be both healthy and smart. Agencies rarely have a problem being smart because of the nature of the work. Like, we're always on this cutting edge. Oftentimes we have to be pulled back, but healthy requires a specific intention, because all things being equal, the healthy company is the resilient company. The resilient companies tend to win out in the long term. So at a high level, that's what EOS does. There are 6 components. I won't go into those. But at a professional level, what we do as implementers is we take those 6 components. They got tools in them. We measure where you were at the start of your journey. And over roughly a year and a half, 2 years, we want to get you 80% or stronger in each of these key components so that you're self-sufficient. And so my goal is to start a client, empower them, make them self-sufficient, and allow them to leave me. So I don't want to embed myself in their business. I want them to be empowered so they can run EOS without me and make it their own. So often I will talk about it in the beginning of our work. It's transactional. This tool does this. Here's how you use this tool. Please don't bend the rules on this tool until you understand the tool. And then it becomes transformative. And when it becomes transformative, you don't think about EOS. It's like riding a bike. This is just how we do business. These are just the tools we use. And that's when the customization can go really deep. And in agencies, that's proven to be really important to make that transition from that transactional to transformative, because they really own it. It becomes core to what they do. So the outcome that I want for agencies with the owners is I want their business value to increase. And I want them to be able to do that in a way that they're proud of. And that usually means we have to make these decisions in the context of their core values. So I literally, like now, I didn't do this when I started, but nowadays when I start new clients, if they're up for it, I like them to get a business valuation that we can also measure 2-3 years later, once a year, so they can see the value of their business increasing. Or if it's not, troubleshooting what's happening along the way. That's not normally part of the EOS process, but for the clients I tend to work with nowadays, that is the outcome we want. We want your business value to grow because you're more likely to have a stable, thriving business as you go, and that's better for everyone.
Great context. And, coming back to anyone who's listened to historic episodes, to really oversimplify Leslie's value proposition is it's having an accountability partner that's taking you on this journey. And once you go from 0 to 1, this whole new business methodology and operating system, once you understand what it is, and it's to a degree, you've had someone guide you through this journey, then it would be amazing for any agency owner to work with you, because that's literally what you do. And therein lies what I think is really interesting for having someone like you on the show. I don't know how many clients in the last 3 years, if you know off the top of your head, but you've perceivably worked with tens of different businesses, but all in the same vertical. And I guess the first real question I have for you is, how similar or different is that journey in entering into the EOS landscape for each of these agency owners or C-suites or sort of the general businesses? Like, are you seeing material differences business to business, or is it much of the same with different areas of weakness across the 6 components?
I would say that thematically, there's definitely themes that have emerged. And at this point, I have worked with 30 agencies and graduated 5. And then 2 of the agencies I've worked with have sold successfully. And so I count those separate from the graduating clients because there was a different end goal that they had in mind with that. So thematically, there's definitely some consistency across my experience with clients there. But the solves, as it were, like in EOS, we talk about solves. The solves are often really different. And I think in terms of just to avoid too much jargon, the way that I think about it is the themes will express themselves in one of the fundamental areas of the business. So if we think of, like, all businesses have 3 functions, they all have marketing and sales. Go out to the market, you make a promise. They all have some version of operations. So operations are how we keep our promises. You give me money, I got to do something that provides the value for that money. That's operations. And then finance. Can we be fiscally responsible with the money going in and out of the business? And then you've got the leadership level. In the US, we call it the visionary, but it's their CEO, the owner. And then they have a right hand called the integrator. Sometimes that's the CEO. But so all the themes are more across the functions of the business versus the 6 key components. I think the components for me are the solves for whatever those issues might be in the way that I look at those things.
Very, very neatly packaged there. And so, I know that you had an extended period where you were in fact the COO of one of these CMS / agencies. Now you've transitioned to sort of building out these operating systems as a coach. And for people who are going through these journeys, right? You've gone from being heavy, growth into deep operations, now into sort of coaching, where it's all about the guidance that you provide. How does it feel to you from a delivery or a sentiment? Like, are there aspects that you miss around sort of the heavy operation? Is taking that position of seeing now, 5 graduated, 2 exits, 25 people on that roadmap, you're actually touching a lot more people and a lot more companies. It's no longer this one-to-one or one-to-many people, but one single focus. I'm just curious, like, what has that journey been like for you?
My gut reaction is very hindsight based. I do not miss being an operations person. It's not in my skill set anymore. And it was one of the fundamental transitions I had to make at a very personal and professional level. And I share versions of this story with some of my clients too, depending on what they're struggling with. So I'll see if I can keep it succinct, because this question I think is actually really profound if you're an owner or if you're part of that leadership team. The way that I was raised, and that includes my early professional career, I had this mindset where if it wasn't difficult for me to do, it was not valuable to anybody else. So there were parts of operations that were extremely difficult for me, despite me really loving the outcomes. So spreadsheets are difficult. I have a hard time reading a spreadsheet in real time. Like when I was going back and forth with the client, if I get deep into numbers, my brain doesn't work that way because I don't visualize very well. But the outcome of the spreadsheets, I've always been great with that. So I was confusing for my own work that I thought that if it was difficult for me, that it's difficult for everybody, and therefore it's valuable. In my journey, the best $500 I've ever spent was with an hour conversation with this coach named Penelope Trunk. In that call, she told me, you got to stop doing that. What you should be doing is what's your common wisdom and charge for that, because it's common to you. So it always replenishes. You're always going to have more of it. You can give it away. You can charge for it. It's going to be a never ending source for you because it's common to you, and your common wisdom is not common for other people. And so if you can find where your common wisdom is abundant for yourself and scarce for others, that's going to be your sweet spot. And in operations, that's not my common wisdom. That's not my, like strength finders will call it different working genius. There's different, but Penelope was the one that introduced me to that concept. And so that let me know that getting out of operations was really critical, to take that conversation with Eric about, hey, you're a better coach than a consultant, and taking that really seriously because I was just burning myself out and out again. So I would not go back to operations or to running an agency in a full-time employee capacity, because it's not my common wisdom. It's not something that I can replenish easily, versus the work I do in the session room with clients. On my hardest day, and there have been some really tough days with clients, at the end of the day, I'm so excited. I'm making a list of things I could have done better, a list of follow-up things. Here's all the things I want to learn more about. And that's been consistently true for 3 years now. So between those two things, when I share this with clients, I'm trying to get especially the owner to think this way. Like, what do you need to let go of inside your agency, inside your day-to-day, that you're just doing it because you think the hard work is what you should be concentrating on, but what you should be focusing on is what is the common wisdom for you? What is that source of replenishment that you love at? It comes back easily and is valuable to the business. You put those things together. So a lot of the coaching and facilitation is taking your question, posing it to the owner, and really over time helping them figure out what is that sweet spot that I should be in. And most of the time it's the visionary role, but not always, because that's usually the key to making the implementation work, is getting the owner in the place where they can just do what they love every single day, delegate everything else that replenishes their energy, which lets the confidence, optimism, like in the face of the hell that can be running a day-to-day agency, right? So that's a very idealistic way to say it, but I guess that's a longer answer to your question there. So yeah, I wouldn't go back to operations. I love what I'm doing now and that I get to help more people, but the fundamental nature of that question is really important.
Firstly, shout out to Penelope Trunk. That is some of the most profound, I've been sat here listening to you, Leslie, but I've been almost doing this micro soul searching of exactly that. What are the things that, what are the things that are naturally replenishing for me that I can do all day? And one of them is exactly this. I mean, my mind races at 1,000 miles an hour right now, listening to that and trying to go through that soul searching. And I think if anyone's listening, even if you cut the episode right now and you talked that as an exercise away and you said to yourself, what are the things that when I come in, I'm both energized and I'm having material impact. And, this is obviously a component of how you get the right people in the right seats when you talk about EOS and its implementation in your business. But I think doing that deeper soul searching and thinking through it it's a really important thing. And I guess on that same in that same vein here, obviously you had that conversation with your still good friend, but your former employer of 4.5, 5 years. And he gave you that feedback. And I would say for a lot of people, that would be a tough pill to swallow. And on top of that, I would say most people, you don't love to hear that kind of feedback. It doesn't matter how self-assured you are. And it sounds like you were really open to taking that on. And almost instantly in that conversation, you were able to sort of wade your way through it. And, I don't know if it was instantly where you acknowledged and said, this is the greatest gift someone had given to me in going through that. But I'm just curious in terms of your approach to this, you deal with a lot of conflict, like organizational conflict resolution and management, and you're dealing with a lot of moving things. At the end of the day, almost all problems are people problems. We can fix the process.
Yes.
But it's like we're doing business with people, not with businesses here. And so I'm just curious, like what are some of the tools or how have you gotten yourself into a place where you're able to take on that feedback, or on the other angle, you're able to help people work their way through those really tough decisions when there are material changes that need to happen in the agencies that you support around, whether it's headcount or operations. So I'd love to just hear your thought process around it.
So here I might need your help keeping me on track. In the moment where I was getting fired, I knew he was right away, like within 3 minutes of the conversation. And I didn't fight it because of that. It was not easy, and I was angry and I was frustrated. And to his credit, he gave a very nice exit package. It was the smoothest thing. And when I say that we're still friends, I mean it. Him, Brad Bell, who's another person at Craft CMS, and we go out drinking once a month and keep in touch, and like our families are friends. Like I think the world of them. So what I learned from that I really take to clients, and I try to collect stories outside of my own experience, but I'm thankful I have one to share from my experiences. I imagine a world in which I talked him out of it. What if I had been able to convince him? I would be stuck in a small company, not in my gift, not helping multiple owners, not being able to leverage all the real pain that comes with growth to help others outside of this one thing. And the person that is now doing what I used to be doing does it so much better than me. It's not close. She's been there and she's fantastic. And so if we had allowed that friendship, if he had allowed that friendship to say, I can't let him go out of this sense of loyalty and we'll work it out, they would be worse off. I would be worse off. The person who really stepped in and filled part of what I was doing, and honestly, she was already doing it. She wouldn't be where she's at. The company wouldn't be where they're at. Their community wouldn't be where they're at. And so that's how I look at it in hindsight, is to really unpack what would have happened if he hadn't had the courage to let one of his friends go. And so when I work with a family business, and we got to talk to family members that way, oftentimes in agencies, you hit something like you asked earlier about the themes. And this may be the type of clients I attract, but agencies, especially in their early growth stages, and early growth stages can still be 15 years, right? 10 to 15 years, where they've been working together for 10 years, but have never had that conversation about what they actually want next in life. And then you get to be, I'll be 50 this year. And so we don't think about how our avoiding hard decisions actually negatively impacts people's careers, their lives, their opportunity for growth. And it's so tricky because you just don't know, but you still should do the right thing. And so one of the through lines I see across clients is they try to fix people problems with process. If I had just given Leslie a better process, maybe he could have thrived. And sometimes that's true. But there's got to be a time limit to it. There has to be a door, like a stop date, because making the hard decision over the long term, you're going to get the better outcome for everyone involved, even though it doesn't feel that way in the moment. So that is on the business side of it. On the personal side, one of the things that happened over the last 5 or 6 years is I've really had to come to grips with my own mental health. And one of the things about being a coach or anything where you're trying to empower others, you have to start getting brutally honest about yourself. Because if I'm inauthentic in a session room, my clients will sniff it out. I can't say, Yoni, please consider therapy, or please consider this thing outside of session. Like I wouldn't call you to task on that inside the room like that, but in a conversation afterwards, if I'm not doing that work myself and I give you that note, there's going to be a crack in my own integrity that will impact part of the work. So a lot of my own work has been making sure I get the therapy I need, getting the diagnosis I need, making sure that some things I would have seen as quality of life, like working out or taking, we call them clarity breaks, just space to really think about what I want in life, what's right for the business. All that really adds up, because that's actually part of the job of leadership. And so there has to be that professional dedication to the knowledge that we need to execute well, but it also has to be that internal commitment to grow your own self. Can I love myself so that I can help others more? Can I cultivate an abundance, whether it's financial, whether it's relationship based, whether it's pleasure based? Like there's all ways you can go with that. So a lot of my journey has been less professional and more on the personal side of making sure that I'm taking care of myself before I take care of other people. And that has been a reversal of how I was raised. That's just as critical, because you will hit a point in your business where you're so stressed out. The money's gone. There's some better you have taken care of yourself, the more you will be able to handle those situations. And the further you are in your entrepreneurial career when that happens, the higher the stakes are. And so those quality of life things quickly switch to fundamentals of being good at leadership. So I think I answered your question there. You got to take care of that professional side, but so much of the journey is the personal growth side, so that they're going in tandem with each other.
Yeah, you definitely hit on it. And I just, again, caught myself drifting off into thinking through some of the really profound points that you were making. It really is like when you're in the position that you're in, when you're effectively coaching 25 plus businesses concurrently on how they can best serve themselves, their partners, their team, and the clients that they're looking to serve, you cannot be inauthentic about the suggestions that you make. And it can't be a situation of do as I say, not as I do. And I think that it's a testament to you that you're going through all those personal and professional development situations whereby you are walking the walk. I will share as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This will be the first time I'm talking about one of the things that I do with two of my business partners sort of in an open forum like this, and they would both be comfortable for me to share this. But we have a therapist that we see on occasion. We've seen him 4 times, and we're trying to make it a staple. Like, I think having a session like this every at least 2 or 3 months, but even every month would be fantastic. And it's been probably one of the more transformative experiences, I would say, from a partnership relationship experience that I've ever had. I would say, like, the cliff notes of what those sessions have been able to afford us is that so much of the issues that crop up in our business and when we don't see eye to eye is often just our inability to get clarity on what the other person is trying to express. So it's just pure, it's miscommunication. And it's that we all, like my 2 business partners are the best people, like inside and out, so authentic. They just want what's best for the world. And all 3 of us sort of fall into that category. But even the 3 of us can have really heated debates and, like a lot of it really constructive, but sometimes not constructive. And so coming back to it and even just, like I'm sitting here thinking, what does 10 years from now look like? Let's for me, let's say I'm close, I'm in my late 30s now, but at a point in time, the coaching thing definitely appeals to me. And I think it's like a super interesting space to be in. You can help so many people and so many businesses, and that's exciting. But yeah, it's just you're getting to do this on the day-to-day and give people critical feedback loops, and it must be very rewarding.
It absolutely is, and I love that you're getting therapy with business partners. That's something that to the best of my knowledge, my clients with multiple business partners aren't doing. And so I'm going to clip this and share it with my clients back because I think it's awesome. And I'm a fan of therapy when nothing is wrong. Like, that's the best time because then you can be really preventative with it. So I love that. Where I wanted to tie both our really vulnerable things back together is that you are a coach right now. Like, as leaders, anytime we have a direct report, we're a coach. And so I have a different flavor of that since I'm working across multiple clients. But the idea of where we have the opportunity to coach, grow, empower all our direct reports. So that work on ourselves, we want to stay integrity with our families, with our business partners, with our employees. And so all that personal effort it builds that integrity over and over and over again. And that will have profound benefits because then you can have healthy conflict, as Patrick Lencioni would say in that trust pyramid. That healthy conflict is so, so important for growth.
I was literally quoting the 5 dysfunctions of a team, that exact pyramid that you're referencing, at a conference that I spoke at earlier this week in Mexico. And to your point, great book for anyone listening, but you have to create a healthy amount of conflict to create positive discourse. If there's no trust in the environment, you can't actually go to these places that you need to in order to achieve sort of the greater good or the ultimate outcome. Yep. And that's we're not always going to agree on everything, but if I'm staying in my lane and they're staying in their lane and we're giving each other the feedback and supporting one another, the business will materially go further. And that's definitely what I've been experiencing, with my business partners and bringing in a therapist. And we brought him in, I believe, before there was any sort of like major discourse or any like challenges. I would say that ever since that first session, which is going back close to 2 years ago now, it was the first session we didn't have like a major breakthrough, but we had the second session maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, and it was like a paradigm shift in that moment. And yeah, I mean, to your point, like I cannot recommend this enough to anyone who's opted in to listen in here on what that means. And to your point as well, doing it before there's a problem is where you will always get the best outcomes, because you come in there so much more, heart open, willing to be vulnerable. And if you sort of wait until there's an issue there, you're going to come in unintentionally. It'll be obviously subconscious, but you're not going to come in with the best intentions because you're not all on side at the same time. So, sort of preventative sessions, I think is some really great advice there. I want to switch gears a little bit here because, I'm sitting here in front of someone who has literally had such a wealth of experience across agencies and now working with so many in, like it's definitely a broad stroke term, agency, digital agency. There's a lot of...
Yes, it is.
there's like technically we have a staffing agency, though I wouldn't really call us like agency land anymore. I sort of look at it more as the service delivery model. And, I'm thinking like web development, design, content, paid media, etc., which I think is more so how you're looking at the equation you're supporting. And, you were saying there's obviously a handful of like through lines of the issues that you see, but just in terms of the current landscape, it's been an interesting climate, to say the least, for the last several years. I'd say since we had the COVID event, like the world has just, ebbed and flowed. We had this whole period where, I think for a couple of years there, they were saying e-commerce is 5 years into the future in the matter of a few months. And then a year after that, where everyone's talking about it's 5 years in the future, the bubble burst, and, like you can't get into e-commerce anymore, though that's not the case. But I'm saying I would say it's been really tumultuous. One of the things I've actually seen is a lot of owner operators of CPG and physical brands have actually moved. I've seen a massive rise of agency owner. Obviously, there's an appeal there where you don't need to outlay the same amount of capital because you're a service business. I'd say it's a lot more taxing in terms of the service delivery, and there's pros and cons to everything, right? But I just love to hear, like, from your lens, what's your take generally on the space inside of agency land? And like, are there any like thematics or trends of the types of businesses that people are getting into, or what sort of 2025, if you're peering into your crystal ball with what you've seen over the last 3 years, consulting for a whole host, like what have you seen? What are you seeing? And what's some solid advice for anyone who's currently in that space?
This is a really fantastic and difficult question. I think where my brain wants to go with this is I think it's more important than ever to understand the business that you're in, that you're actually in. It's been true for a long time that you can't be a generalist and expect to grow. And what is becoming more true, and I think where there's a lot of unknown and a lot of fear and uncertainty around it, and some of it rightly so, I think, is around AI, and not just AI, but the other things that are enabled by that. Because the path from specialization to being a commodity is shorter and shorter and shorter. And no one really knows yet, or it's difficult to know in terms of a specialization bet, what specialty that you can grow around that's not going to be a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. And so there is a urge to compete on price versus being price sensitive. And some version of this question is being asked and wrestled with across all my clients, all the people I talk to, across all different types of agencies, firms, professional services, whether it's SEO, branding, marketing, e-commerce, payment gateways, like a wide variety of clients and then people I'm talking to. And so when dealing with this at the leadership level, I think it's really important to know at least two things. Where do I see us going? And you're making a long-term bet. This direction, I want to go this way. Even if I don't know the how, we're going to get there. But make a bet in the direction that you can rally people behind. We want to go this way. And that's an incredibly difficult question to answer consistently. So it can take like a year to figure that out, maybe more. But you can start making bets in that direction, because if you leave that decision open-ended, you can't test it. So I want to get the clients I work with to make a decision, even if they don't know it's the best, so they can start testing it. Because from a strategic standpoint, if you're a small to medium-sized business, you cannot make 10 strategic bets a year. You can really only make 1, 2, maybe 3 and test them. So if you leave where we're going as an open-ended decision, then your bets are all over the place versus really concentrated. We're going to try this, maybe a quarter, maybe 2. Is there some movement there? How does this look like? How does this look like? And that also reduces your risk in terms of how many resources you're putting into what versus keeping things running on a daily basis at the same time. So once you know what the bet is, then in terms of EOS, we have a tool called a Vision Traction Organizer that takes the high level components of your business, puts them all on, if you're printing it out, literally a single page. And we have this place called measurables. And these measurables, what we want to see these are the handful of measurables that if these are in the green, if we're hitting these measurables, then our business is growing the way we expect it to be, growing in the right direction. So if we have our 10-year target going this way and our core focus lined up, then what are the 1 or 2 measurables that we need to be keeping track of at 3-year, 1 year, and then quarterly? And they may not all be this exact same measurable, but they should be telling a narrative about how you're testing the growth trajectory and where your business might be able to grow. Especially if you're coming from, we do like 25 different services. Which of those has the growth path in terms of which are going to remain profitable, which are going to be break even for us, and now they need to be more like leading service indicators. And so making bets that way, the faster you get to that point of making bets, I think the better off you're going to be, because then you can be really responsible or as risky as you want to be with pouring your resources and to figuring out what's working or not working in terms of your long-term growth. So that would be like the very businessy part of that equation, is figuring that part out. Then I think the second one, just as a very macro answer, is to keep the company culture healthy. And that goes back to the people part of it, that open, honest, transparent. There can be too much transparency, I think, at certain levels where it's distracting from the daily work, but at the leadership level, open, honest transparency, and really understand, again, the business that we're in versus the business we need to be in.
I think those are really good insights. Like, just to paraphrase the first one a little bit, you need to be clear on who you are. I mean, it's very timely that we're having this conversation. We just rebuilt our VTO after going through that process. Vision Traction Organizer is VTO, and we went through it for the first time in a long time. After 3 years, we had self-implemented. We weren't necessarily purists, and we just went back to the drawing board. And I can honestly say, 6 months into that process, we probably hit our 1-year plan goals, which we'd actually mapped out for 18 months. Like, we'd built it sort of 6 months into last year. And we said, we'll build it for the end of 25 is sort of our 1-year plan. Give ourselves a little bit of leeway, give ourselves a little bit more time. And what we found is we actually hit that goal 6 months in. And so I think the reasons why we were able to hit a lot of the metrics that we were trying to hit 18 months on was exactly that, is that we made our bets, we narrowed our focus. I think one of the sort of the superpowers of entrepreneurship and particularly agencies, is how do you niche down and be the very best at one, two, maybe three things. There's always the appeal to be a full service agency where you're one-stop shop, but that's a really hard beast to tame. And so I think that, coming back to your point, I think that that's really sound advice. And coming back to sort of the 10-year target, 3-year plan, 3-year picture, 1-year plan, it's that throughput of what are we doing? Like, what are the initiatives that we are looking to achieve that's in the most detailed phase over the next 12 months? And how do they break down into quarters? Or for us, we do them in half-yearly chunks. And I think the soul searching was sort of the soundbite for everyone listening toward the start of this. And I would say on the back end of this conversation, I cannot stress enough the advice that Leslie is sharing with you is effectively that if you can build in measured metrics into your business and build clarity that everyone can see and have a degree of transparency where everyone feels heard and feels like they're on task, it is a paradigm shift to your entire organization. I mean, I'm curious. You mentioned something a second ago there, and it's one of the things that I personally wrestle with. Before we hit record, we both said, we're oversharers. When I'm going through, when I'm going through something, it's central to what I'm thinking about, and so I'll look to have that conversation with a lot of different people and try and get a lot of feedback points. And it's like you almost get stuck in a bit of a loop. And one of the challenges that I've always been on the other side of the spectrum in every company and every agency that I've worked for, I've always felt like I had no visibility, not only on the general direction of the business, but any of the performance metrics or the revenue. Like, none of those things were shared and I was senior leadership in some of these companies. We're on the other side of the spectrum. Like, we share what our profitability goal is for the year every single week in our leadership meeting, or for those who run on EOS, the L10 meeting. The metrics that we're tracking in our dashboards is literally, what is our weekly revenue? Did we hit our stretch goal, our baseline goal? Where do we sit across all of these metrics, from, jobs added to roles placed to clients churn to like NRR, every metric under the sun that's relevant to the things that are important to how we can sort of get feedback. And my question is, like, what does oversharing look like? I have felt like it's never been a concern for me, because we've always been sort of a break-even business. And now, because we've been doing the shiny object, well, I'll put my hand up and say the classic shiny object, visionary, looking to do too many things. And now that we've created a really narrow, focused vision on who we are and who we support, we're seeing a lot more traction. And we're becoming a lot more profitable. And so I'm curious to know, what are the things that start to create distractions from an oversharing perspective for companies that you have either worked with or been a part of?
I think it comes in two parts. So the part I want to start with is that I love and champion EOS's approach to this by default, which is once a quarter, you share with your entire company, all hands, state of the company, the metrics on the VTO, revenue, profit, whatever those measurables are, your priority, your ROC completion rate, and you really own that. So I think what my brain is trying to get at is the cadence of how you share is really important. So once a quarter is the right cadence. I think that the danger with oversharing happens, are we asking individual contributors to inadvertently consider leadership things when that's not their job? And so if I have clients that, like, you're tracking revenue on a weekly basis, I want my growth team and the leadership team to know that every single week, maybe sales team daily, right? But if I'm sharing that data across the company and I'm really hitting home, like, we got to meet numbers, that might actually distract the billable people or the individual contributors from the numbers they should be concentrating on. So that I think is where the oversharing requires some thought, is what's the cadence that I'm sharing? And am I inadvertently asking someone to consider leadership things instead of really concentrating on what their unique gift is in their particular role in the company and executing that to the best of their abilities? And so that's where there's not a clear line, but that's where I think it's thoughtful to think about. I know for me, if I have any anxiety about money when I was an employee, it would distract me from my job, because that was a source of real like hardship for me growing up. Versus on a leadership level, I'm paid to think about anxiety. Like, this is part of my job to consider the money, the revenue part, et cetera. And I'm not expected to do anything else. Like, the things I'm executing on is at the leadership level. So I think that's where it requires some thought. So the cadence of EOS, that state of the company, the default things that are there. But past that, I'd be really careful for those reasons. Like, everyone in EOS has a number they're responsible for. When we distract for that number, we might inadvertently impact their ability to create value, which leads to revenue.
That is sound advice, and from someone who's obviously seen inside of a lot of companies to come out with something quite profound. Because what I'm picking up here, it's you need to meet people where they're at as it relates to their accountability and responsibility in the business. And, if our recruitment team is stressing out about us not generating enough new deals in our pipeline to support them and their placements, where they can't impact it, and all of a sudden that has, a problem. Or are we going to make payroll this month, or things like that, then all of a sudden you're oversharing and you're giving people things that are in their sphere of concern that they can't really influence and can't impact. And so it's that. And I think also just that once a quarter cadence, getting, the broader stroke team involved. We're doing town halls now. We've got a team of about 85, and we do a town hall once a month. But at that once a month cadence, we don't need to go to that deep dive. It's more about what's happening in the company, new things that are rolling out, keeping it light. And then every third, having maybe a little bit more scaled up version of it where we show them the metrics. And I think, depending on the business you're in, there's not a crazy significance on a week on week or month on month delivery. But if you're looking at them in quarters, then you start to see some impact. Sound advice. Leslie, I could sit here and ask you questions for the next several hours. You're just you're a true fountain of knowledge here, but unfortunately I have to be respectful of both of our times here. Yeah. Before I do let you go, I guess there's two things. The first thing I have is, again, just given sort of the broad stroke nature, and you've given some really great nuggets of insights and sort of soul searching. But for anyone out there who's, whether they're running an agency or they're running a small to medium business, is there any critical lesson or thing along your journey, outside of that woman whose name I have forgotten, but
Penelope Trunk.
Penelope Trunk, yeah, and like a really memorable name. That's why I was really annoyed with myself. Any other sort of profound things where people are sort of going through it and they're trying to wade their way through that has really stuck with you as a learning, or anything that you look to instill in your current sort of client base that is sort of central to your teaching? The older I get, the more and more I found that the hill I will die on is you got to live your core values, like your personal core values, and keep that integrity. So my core value that my partner Laura and I share is just love first. In an UX context, we say love first, solve second. In our family, we say love first, fix second. And so for me, that's been profoundly helpful. Because no matter what I'm dealing with, I have that foundational posture I can rely on. Is it going to be difficult, easy, etc.? This is a little bit embarrassing, but I believe it to such the extent that I got it tattooed. So I've got love first on my left arm. So as I'm thinking through things, if I need a reminder, but times are challenging, regardless of religious, political beliefs, everything. So having that foundational posture, how am I going to go face things? I think if you understand your own why and you spend time at a deeper level, then you can deal with anything. That is sound advice, and it's funny. We share that. I mean, mine's a whole story, but I
Yeah.
also have one tattoo on an area that's like quite exposed on my forearm, and it's about my personal intention and what's important to me. And I think that having those things that ground you and bring you back to your sense of self and your core values is really everything. Now I'm going to have to ask another question. How helpful do you find that? I sometimes feel like a fraud at times where I look down and I'm like, I'm not living my truth, and I've got it tattooed on my arm.
It is probably one of the most helpful things I've done in my adult life. That's not saying everyone should go out and do that, but for me in my own journey, it has made a significant difference.
Well, it's like a re-up for me to remember it. Before I do let you go, obviously, if anyone were to look to engage you or reach out or look for guidance, support, EOS implementation, what would be the best way for them to get in touch?
So my website is lesliecamacho.com. There's a contact form there, or you can DM me on LinkedIn. I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn. Just search Leslie Camacho and I'll show up there. And especially if you do Leslie Camacho EOS, you'll find me. I'm not really on social media because I'm terrible at it, but I'm really active on LinkedIn and I'm responsive to emails. And if you track down my phone number, you can call me. It's not that hidden.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put those, maybe not your phone number, but the others in the show notes, and we'll let people reach you that way. Leslie, cannot thank you enough for being the first guest back, and have just really enjoyed getting to learn more about you and just how many incredible businesses you're able to support through the methodologies you are building. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor, and I sincerely appreciate it. I'm looking forward to listening to future episodes.
Thank you very much.